All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our Williamsport City Council meeting, our last one of the year. It's Thursday, December 14th. We're in Trade and Transit 2/3 floor. Please rise for the invocation by Councilwoman Bonnie Katz, followed by her flag salute.
'Twas the night of the budget, and all through the House, we've listened, analyzed, and worked for the good of all. We prayed and asked for the Lord's guidance to come up with the best for all. We've decked the halls with good wishes around and a wonderful life for those who are leaving our happy house. And as the night fell silent, we say farewell to some of our friends and colleagues. They will be missed. To everyone else, we pray for peace and prosperity. So a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a joyous Kwanzaa to all, and to all a blessed holiday season.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 3, approval of city council meeting minutes from December 7th. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the meeting minutes? Hearing seen none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 4, limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests tonight. We're going to jump around here a little bit. We're going to jump down to item 12, Mrs. Frank.
A resolution for various insurance needs for policy year 1124 through 1125.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Molly, good evening.
Good evening. So tonight I bring the annual resolution for updating of insurance needs for the next year. This is the liability and workers' compensation coverage. So what you have in front of you is a quote for property, general liability, auto, and law enforcement coverage, roughly $489,000. Workers' compensation coverage for roughly $312,000. And there is a cyber liability policy that is pending that will not exceed $20,000. And on the Zoom call tonight, we have Robert Zedrick from Gallagher, which is the city's broker. If you have any questions for him.
Thank you, Molly. We did not have a committee meeting this week, so nothing to review from committee. Any comments or questions on the resolution from members of council? Okay. Here you can see none. Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 12.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for everything, Molly. We'll move to item 13, certificate of appropriateness for 155 West 4th Street. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. I don't see Gary here. I'll take a stab at this. So we have a request to locate a business ID for a new establishment at the former Moon Raven location. Owner representative here from the new establishment, what appears to be the Crooked Goose.
That's correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I will open the floor for questions from members of council. I would just say it's great to see something going in there so quickly, and I think you're trying to get it going tonight.
Opening the doors at 5 o'clock this evening. Yes.
All right, so we'll get you going here.
Thank you.
Thanks for getting something in there, for taking the chance and moving on it. Excited to see it
I'm
grow
excited.
and prosper.
My family and I are very excited. Yep.
Any comments or questions? Mrs. Katz?
leave it to you to come up with the crooked goose. Thank you for everything you've done for the city. I mean, you brought a lot of establishments in, and
Absolutely.
we do really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bider?
If you'd like to take a moment and just explain a little bit about what the restaurant is going to be, the theme.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. First off, I'll start out. My youngest daughter's name is Lucy and she's our Lucy Goose. And
That's awesome.
So that's where the name ended up coming from. I was great friends with Chip and Aaron. I, loved the business that they had, and I'm also friends with Matt. And I think the building is an amazing building and an amazing location, and it should be a cornerstone here in Williamsport. And it was a business that wasn't operating on a regular basis, and they were looking to get out of it. And so I graciously accepted their offer to take it over for them. They ran an Irish pub. We're putting in a British pub, English speakeasy for the most part, opening this evening. We'll be open for starters Tuesday through Saturday, all day long, at 11 a.m. for lunch, all the way through past dinner into the late night. If I can find enough kitchen staff and enough help in this community, I would love to open for brunch as well on Sundays. That's about all I've got at the moment. I do not have haggis on the menu. We are English. It was a quick turnaround, but I worked closely with Chip and Aaron to let me get in there and get some work done before the bill of sale was even completed. Finally got the liquor license approval on Monday, and so we decided let's get open. It's the holidays. We need to see something in there for downtown. So
Awesome.
here we are.
Awesome. Mrs. Katz.
If nobody's seen the bar, what Matt did for that bar is absolutely
It's a
incredible.
beautiful bar. Yeah,
It's incredible.
Yeah,
It really is.
it's a beautiful
And
bar.
what he's done with the insides, are you keeping all the I want to say church pews, because that's where they came from.
You can have
Gorgeous.
one. Yep, absolutely.
And the mural in the kitchen is
Yeah,
gorgeous.
yeah, the mural in the kitchen is gorgeous. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's an amazing building. And you have to see the underbelly of it to realize how
Mhm.
exceptional it is. The food is in a old furs safe, so it's got 3-foot thick walls, and then the office is in another steel box. It's a pretty amazing building. So all we did was take down all the tchotchke beard paraphernalia and put up our own decor.
Any other comments or questions? Let's get you back downtown.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here, and for answering some questions and telling us what's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mrs.
Happy
Frank
to.
on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Good luck.
Council, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you
Look
very
forward
much.
to it. We'll be open for lunch tomorrow if anybody wants to stop in.
Ooh.
I mean, I hear this, he's going, we're just saying he's going a little late tonight. Not sure how late we'll be open. But feel free to check us out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Chris, nobody online? Okay. We'll jump up to item 6, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance transfer ordinance number 5, and final reading to remove from the table.
Is there a motion, a second to remove from the table?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on removing? Mrs. Frank, motion to remove from the table?
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to remove passes 6-0. Scott, I'll turn it over to you, but
Yeah,
kind of
there's-
chatted about this earlier.
there's really nothing more to discuss. I mean, we didn't have any discussion on it the last meeting. The reason for it was tabled, and we're looking at some time crunches on some other payments, but everything worked out.
Yeah, from what we talked about, we're able to accommodate it in a different way that
Right.
is more advantageous, so we're good to go.
Yep.
Correct?
Correct.
Perfect.
Yep.
Any comments or questions on the transfer ordinance in second reading? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on item number 6, please, second reading.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item 7, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance transfer number 9 in final reading from Act 13.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Chief Bolt, welcome,
evening.
sir.
Yes. Good evening. members of council. This is an ordinance transfer again, before you. It's for tasers to refit our department. I believe that we initially suggested it comes out of Act 13. I know there's been some discussion over the last week about where that funding may come from. We also discussed about the aging disposition of our current tasers and the need to have them switched out as soon as possible.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Bolt. Remind me, what's the timing on this? There was a potential price change going into
Correct.
next year, is that right?
That is correct. If we act before the end of the year, we will be able to
Okay,
get the price before it increases next year, as well as there's a buyback of our current stock.
okay, gotcha. Okay, and I know, Tracy, you sent over an ordinance for ARPA tied to this because we asked you that question. I appreciate you doing that. What's everybody's thoughts? Kind of sleeping on this, honestly. Feel like we probably should just pass this because number one, there's a handful of ARPA things that we know we are moving around today. We'll talk about this when we go to item 11, but I think part of what we need to understand for second reading, and maybe Heather, this is more of a question for you, and we can chat with Derek whenever he gets here. Not necessarily what we have left today, but I think an update on what's going on with some of these other projects. What do we anticipate from them either being left over? Or are they going to need more, like redevelopment authority, for example? My only point in saying that is, I know there's about 2.5 million there now. There might be more, or there may not be, is all I'm saying. And so I think rather than hold this up, it might make sense to do this. That's all I'm saying.
Included in the ARPA information that was provided to you is a column that's obligated. So we tried to anticipate what would be used to let you know what would be available.
I got you. So that unobligated column is what you're anticipating actually being free that we need to get through.
Correct.
Gotcha. And that's factoring in, estimates on where the redevelopment authority is going to be the next couple of years, that kind of stuff. I'm just using it as an example.
That is what we've been told.
Okay. So
Yes.
your best, as again, estimate.
Right.
I understand that.
Correct.
Okay. I would be okay passing this and not doing ARPA because I think we're going to burn through that 2.5 million pretty easily next year with some things we're working through. Other thoughts? Everybody agree?
I think
Okay.
so. I think
Okay.
we can't hold this up.
Yeah.
I do have a question though.
Mrs. Katz, yeah.
Do you know what the buyback is going to be?
I
By
don't
any
know
chance?
offhand what it is.
They'll analyze it when they get the equipment.
I believe they did give us a set cost. I don't
Okay.
remember what it is because that's being brokered by Captain Ottaviano. But I do know that our current ones that we do have, it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to make it worthwhile.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, 51, you're getting
Yes.
51?
I believe the number
Or
is
is it
51.
51 and one extra?
Yes,
Or 51,
I believe
50
it's,
and 50 and one extra?
I believe it's enough to fit every officer plus have an extra for in case one goes down.
I remember the extra, but I couldn't
Yes.
remember which number. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you all for thinking through that. Both of you, thank you for working through some stuff, answering a couple questions between last week and this. We appreciate it. It was helpful.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Frank, on the motion for item 7 and final reading, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder,
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item 8, Mrs. Frank.
an ordinance amending Article 151 of the codified ordinances, removing members of city council from participation in the officers and employee pension fund in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. We had a little bit of a discussion on this last week. Nothing's changed from last week. This kind of ties back with the changes we made. February? So any comments or questions though? Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 8, final reading.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We'll jump down to item 11, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance, ARPA transfer ordinance number 10 in first reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Scott, welcome and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Good evening, members of council. ARPA transfer ordinance number 10. So this is the transfer funds from Public Works contingency account to Public Works levy account in the amount of $19,000. This is for a change order for additional work that was performed under the levee relief well testing contract. Originally, the original contract was for 26 wells. They did soundings to determine whether there was sediment that needed removed from inside of those wells. The additional work increased that to 102 wells. And that was to, like I said, determine whether sediment needed removed, which was removed by an air force method.
Thank you very much, sir. Any comments or questions on this transfer in first reading? Again, remember, we'll have a second reading January 4th in our first meeting back in the new year. Any comments or questions though? I would say when we do second reading, I think some of the final changes we make tonight that we're talking through, I think we can make those changes in ARPA then at that second reading and get some of that remaining unobligated funding obligated and then push through and hopefully be in good shape by the end of next year. So. Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 11, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Mr. Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Chris, nobody online? Okay. I don't see Mr. Stamen or the mayor here. You think you're okay? Everybody okay with the reappointment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item 5 then is a reappointment to the RVTA board. We've got Richard Stamen of Ravine Road reappointed to a 5-year term starting on the beginning January 1st of 24 and ending in 2028. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. I think most of us know Richard. He's a good man. And I trust he's doing some good things over at the authority. So any comments or questions on the reappointment? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion for item 5.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. All right, I was trying to hold out for a little bit longer for the last two, but we'll get moving. All right, Mrs. Frank, item 9, please.
An ordinance adopting various operating budgets for the city of Williamsport, including the general fund, emergency and reserve fund, capital project fund, city operating fund, liquid fuels fund, debt service fund, and Act 13 in final reading.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Second reading of our annual budget that we have to pass to spend money next year. Had a good conversation and made a few changes last week during first reading. I think there's a couple of additional changes that we combination need to make and I think want to make that a number of us has kind of talked through and worked through over the past week. And so I'll start with one. And let me find here where I'm at. Just give me a second. I'll start with one. I know there's a couple other ones that others want to make. There's a couple additional that I want to make as well. So I'm going to take everybody to page 17. I believe that's the correct page, interest under finance and purchasing, Tracy. And it would be line item 232078530. So it was brought to my attention and a couple others' attention, and I think Friday or Monday. Unfortunately, we have a penalty that will we will have to endure from the IRS that Tracy was working through, but unfortunately did not go our way. That penalty was $170,000, 180. Okay. And so by my math, we're going to need to increase that to from $15,000 to $195,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Yeah, I know it's a bummer, but hey, we fought the good fight, right? So that is what it is. Any comments or questions on that individual change? Mrs. Katz.
Tracy, did they give us a little bit of a break or no?
They did not. By the time I got here a year and a half ago, it was already in civil penalty phase, which says you can't ask for abatement. I tried anyway, and they did not allow it.
Even though there was such a change in the government and everything?
They said, they said that the city had didn't have a reasonable excuse for why they didn't respond to prior letters from the IRS. So they were not willing to abate it.
Okay.
Okay,
I tried.
thank you.
We appreciate you trying. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Mrs. Frank on the proposed amendment.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, proposed amendment passes 6-0. Let's jump to page 30. There's a couple of changes that we can pay for with ARPA just to save a little bit extra in our budget. First one is line item 2440-64050 firearms ammunition. We can pay for those out of rescue plan funding from confirmation from UHY. So I think we can put that in on the January 4th meeting. And then you get what you need to do. Chief, if I recall from last week, you're able to kind of purchase that ahead a little bit as well. Is that accurate?
Yes,
So-
we're trying to forecast
Okay,
with our ammo purchases.
awesome. If you're able to kind of work through what that might look like by the first week of January,
Oh, yeah.
maybe we can add a little bit more to purchase ahead to kind of work ahead a little bit.
Sure.
But just let us know.
Absolutely.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the proposed amendment? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Franklin, the proposed amendment. I'm sorry, reducing that to 0 for clarity.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, proposed amendment passes 7-0. Let's go to page 32, fire department. The support equipment line item, I'm gonna make a motion to reduce that from $75,000 to 0. Is there a second?
Second.
Same kind of thing. We're gonna budget that in ARPA. We can use all of that out of rescue plan funding. I know Chief Ungst, Assistant Chief Lucas, you've sent some additional stuff to kind of help us through going into next year. We'll look at that as we kind of mentioned as well. Okay. But that is one we will definitely do. Any comments or questions on that change? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the additional amendment.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
yes,
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, proposed amendment passes 7-0. Liz, we covered the IRS item
Okay.
for
got
you.
it.
Yep.
It's in there. All right.
Vince, I know there was one on your end that you wanted to work through. If you'd like to do that now.
Yep,
you're
there
welcome
was-
To do that.
There was a couple,
Okay.
so. If I could direct everyone to page 52, please. So as promised, I did get a chance to sit down and speak with several of our department heads, had some really good conversation, good insights. had the opportunity to sit down and go over the budget with Tracy, see what we were able to move around. See what we could use, ARPA funding to pay for, to hopefully lessen the, tax increase and tax burden on the residents. So with that, what I would like to propose to amend is to reduce line item 80548436, capital purchases for fire from 806,000 to reduce down to 400,000.
I'll second that.
So the, what, Tracy, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm just waiting.
Oh,
I'm excited.
you can approach the podium and just wait and jump in whenever you need to.
We cheated. Tracy helped us.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're hoping to do is move these from capital purchases over to general fund and utilize ARPA dollars to fund these. Again, we only have so much time to use the ARPA funds. These are qualifying, again, to help alleviate some of the tax burden.
Right.
So, Norm, do I have to do these line by line, or do we have to vote to amend each one of these line by line, or can I make the amendment for all of them?
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter because it's decreasing. You're decreasing item 6, we're going to say anyway.
Mhm.
See if you want to adjust if you want to do it as a bulk amendment, we can do that.
Okay,
I think
then I'll just do it as a bulk amendment.
So so how do you want to change your amendment?
So what I would like to do then is I would amend that we reduce line item 8054844036 from 806,000 to 400,000.
Okay.
Line item 8054844039 from 40,000 to 0. Reduce line item 8054844040 from 65,000 to 0.
Okay.
And line item 8054844041 from 55,000 to 0.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second on your revised amendment. Vince kind of outlined the rationale. Any comments or questions on that proposed amendment? Ms. Mealy.
Tracy, where does that additional revenue stand then? Or
I'm
what are
sorry.
the plans for the leftover money? Vince?
So we're going to be able to transfer that fund. Those funds will be able to transfer over to the general fund. And then we'll be able to use ARPA to make these purchases.
Okay. However, that means that we're effectively shorting our contribution to the capital projects fund this year.
No, the transfer into the capital projects fund will remain the same. What you're essentially doing is transferring the savings that had been put in capital projects for those purchases back to the general fund because they're purchased out of ARPA. You don't need that cash in the capital projects fund anymore.
Mhm.
So in addition to what has been proposed in terms of reductions, there will also be, I'm assuming, a proposal to transfer those savings back to the general fund and for the general fund to receive those savings back.
Okay. I would not support that transfer motion. I'm fine with paying for these items out of ARPA funds. And I would be fine with transferring the $400,000 that we put into the capital projects fund that really should have gone into the general fund anyway into it, but I would not support the remaining fund transfer. I think that we should leave that money in capital projects for future overages that are almost certain to occur at some point with items that we're going. We are obviously saving in capital projects for future purchases for items within departments. We know that most of those items are likely to come in higher by the time we get to that purchasing point than they are right now. I think that we would be wisest to take the $400,000 and leave the remainder. So this is not an objection to purchasing these items with American Rescue Plan Act funding, although I do think that we should have a sit down and look at exactly what else we're going to purchase with American Rescue Plan Act funding so that we don't miss something important. But I would strenuously object to transferring any portion. I understand that your logic there, Tracy. But I think that it's important for us to maintain a standing contribution to this fund that mirrors what we will need to put into it annually. And transferring this money back out into the general fund gives us the false impression that we have done that while we haven't. And I think that the capital projects fund is an exceptionally important thing for us to fund at the full dollar amount. Because otherwise we leave ourselves, pardon me, who knows what that was? We leave ourselves back in the position that we were in before we hired Tracy to join our ranks for a while, and before we were blessed with these American Rescue Plan Act funds of leasing equipment within every department and paying top dollar to provide ourselves with that equipment, instead of being able to look forward and save the money for the purchases that we knew that we'd need.
So quick question.
Mhm.
So we're proposing to save
Mhm.
$550,000 roughly,
Right.
right?
Yes.
If we would only transfer over 400, as Ms. Mealy's saying, we would essentially have still an additional $150,000 that we would not transfer, that would just be sitting there. Is there any issue with that? Or am I misinterpreting what
I'm trying to think like you're thinking, so I apologize.
That's okay, no worries.
But the savings will still be transferred over to the capital projects fund as we planned, as is in the capital budget.
Mhm.
What we're doing is we're saying, we have these savings that we put into the capital projects fund for these specific purchases, and now we're gonna make it out of ARPA.
Mhm.
So the savings is sitting in capital projects and not going to be used for the purchase of capital projects.
Right.
So we're transferring that back to the general fund.
Right.
We'll still annually save for the replacement of those
Right.
items in the future. So it's not changing. I don't look at it
Okay.
as changing the annual savings that's going into from the operating budgets into capital projects. What I think is being proposed is that the savings that we had originally put into capital projects for those items is being transferred back to the general fund because we have ARPA funding as a benefit this year. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does, correct.
Okay.
I guess my question is, the savings that we just proposed,
Yes.
what if we don't transfer all those savings over, is my question.
Okay, so if, for instance, you said, I only want to transfer, I don't know, $450,000 out of capital projects into the general fund, the rest of it then would be reallocated to additional capital projects that come up along the way, or reallocated against the savings from prior, or the reallocated against the allocation of those costs in the future.
So they would essentially be there for use in capital projects.
Other capital projects.
in-
So
in-
for
in the
instance,
future.
right, Ms. Mealy spoke about capital playground equipment
Uh-huh.
at the last meeting. Some of that isn't on the future capital project schedule. So maybe that goes into
Right.
savings for those projects in the future. So it doesn't
Got it.
have to be all or nothing.
Got it.
Right.
It's just whatever council wishes to be moved over into the general fund, and the rest could be reallocated to capital projects.
Here's why I'm asking that question. I think kind of what you're getting at, Liz, is like, you're a little nervous about drawing it down to the point because we've been able to implement a structure that helps
Right.
us save, et cetera.
And
My point is
I
saying that-
understand, my point is, if we pay for these items with ARPA and we take that money back into the general fund, yes, Tracy's right that we are still initially making the contribution, but then it is coming back out into the general fund, and we are not experiencing the process of saving in the same
Correct.
way.
My point in asking these questions is, I think we can do both. I think we can save, as you're saying, we can have a little bit there more for future stuff, achieve what Vince is talking about,
Right.
and bringing some savings over. By my math, $300,000 to $400,000 of it would get us to where we have openly talked about doing.
That was what I thought, right?
So-
That was my math too. What you guys wanted out of it, I think could be achieved by $400,000. I would
Correct.
recommend that we basically transfer the sale of surplus property back into the general fund budget.
Yeah.
And we leave the remaining funds within capital projects.
Correct.
And hopefully they will do some good there, whether that is an overage and cost on something that we're supposed to purchase next year, or whether we can use this as the first year of savings that I estimated at about $125,000 a year toward the replacement of parks equipment annually, or, as needed. So, anyway. All of which is to say, Vince, I don't have any problem with you paying for this stuff with ARPA. Once again, I was beginning an objection to the other side of it before we made it through this hurdle so that we could have the conversation about the two things simultaneously.
I can
Okay.
understand that. So then if we do not vote to transfer the other, the three other items over, pardon me, which comes out to approximately $160,000. Where does that affect us as far as the tax millage increase?
So if we, by my math, if we transfer over at least $400,000, that gets us to the goal of halfway in between on the tax millage, okay? If we do more, then fine, right? But my point is, to Liz's point, we don't need all of those savings to reach the goal that we talked about.
No,
Right.
and if that gets us to the, the number that we had all discussed, that I think that seeing the financial future of our city, a couple years down the road, there's going to be increases. But if only transferring over the 400,000 gets us to the number that we need, we can leave the other, if we can leave the other numbers, the other 160,000 there, it gets us to where we need to get. And ensuring that one of the concerns that I had is, if we don't do this, given the limited time that we have to spend the ARPA dollars, I don't want to be in a position to where we have to give it back. So as long as everybody feels confident that, the additional $160,000 that's going to stay there, in a weird way, I'm going to recommend that we make sure we find a way to spend this money.
I'm sure.
I don't think we need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll figure it
Then
out.
we've talked about it several times, haven't we, John? Making sure that we utilize all of it.
Oh, you mean the American Rescue Plan Act funding?
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you meant the money that we were leaving in the capital projects.
Oh, no.
fund.
So
It's like-
so did I.
Okay.
I apologize. No.
Okay.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I would rescind. my-
No,
Oh,
your
no, you're
motion's
good,
fine.
you're good.
Your motion
You're
to
good.
reduce the line items is fine. It's where we'll want to change potentially is where we move it over.
Correct.
Okay,
So your motion, your current motion is fine.
okay.
So we'll leave that as it is. Any other comments or questions on the motion to reduce the expenditure line items? Okay, Mrs. Frank, on the proposed change.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, proposed change passes 7-0. And then Vince,
Okay,
on the revenue transfer side,
yep. Then
rather than whatever we reduced, just do it by 4.
Yep, what I would then amend. Okay, let's see, we had so that came out to $549,833 if we reduce that by 400,000. So I would amend that we transfer $149,833. Is that the
I think
accurate
the
figure?
opposite is what they're trying to get at, that you're going to transfer $400,000 back to the general fund.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Attorney Yoder?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's back in the, Tracy, remind me the page number.
Page
Page
52.
52. I think the motion actually sounds like reducing line item 80534911 from $400,000 to 0.
No,
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 I'm trying to find the line item.
There probably isn't one at this point.
Yeah,
It will be a line item that's created that's called transfer to the general fund
yes.
Okay.
for $400,000.
Mhm.
And then a transfer into the general fund for $400,000. So you're just moving 400,000 from one fund into the other fund for those savings.
So we do both of those on page 52.
52 is transfer out to the general fund, which there is no account for at this point.
Okay.
But we can't just
Create that.
reduce that $400,000 in surplus property and plug it, no?
Do that, and there's more than $400,000, then I've gotta play with that.
Well, I guess what I was saying is we don't know how much it's gonna be, correct?
Correct.
So we can't just
Do you wanna?
line it into the general fund and reduce it to zero. I mean, you tell me, I'm just
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah,
I would just say that any excess sale proceeds may want to be saved for future fire equipment purchases. So
Got
if
it.
you move the proceeds to the general fund, then you've moved the
Okay.
proceeds to the general fund.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be that you would make a motion to transfer $400,000 from the capital projects fund and then into the general fund.
And then you'll make it work.
And we'll make it
Okay.
work within the account number structure.
Yeah, that's what I was
If-
looking for, was
yes.
like where, like I was looking at the front, assuming that like the line item would be in the front, but I don't think we have a line item.
So in terms of the
And that's
capital
okay.
projects fund, there is no account.
Gotcha.
Probably in the general fund, there is no account either, so
That's
we'll
okay.
create those accounts.
Okay.
But that's what it would be, a motion to move 400,000 or whatever number council approves from the capital projects fund into the general fund.
Then I'll make a motion to move $400,000 from the capital projects fund into the, what was it again, Tracy?
General fund.
General fund. Thank you.
I'll second that. Sorry, I was looking for the technical line item
Right.
and
They don't exist at this point because
So,
we've really
yeah.
never done this.
okay. Any comments or questions?
Has the chief kept up with this?
We'll get you there if
I
you
know.
didn't. It's all good. All right, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the proposed change.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to change passes 7-0. Thanks for helping us through that,
Certainly.
Tracy. Any other proposed changes? Those were the only changes that I had on the list from talking to people since between meetings. Anything else from other members?
I just want to say I made that difficult on purpose. So we all appreciate the easier times when we do this.
I
So
hope
it
you
was on
understand.
purpose. All right.
Okay.
I thought that was my job, Vince.
All right. Yeah, so by my math, we've been able to make changes to the point where we can adjust the millage rate to half, kind of getting us halfway in between there. Which I'm excited for and appreciate everybody's deliberation, discussion, help, in collaboration and kind of working through this in addition to the administration. So any final comments, questions, additional changes to the budget before we vote on it? Okay, hearing seen none, Mrs. Frank, item 9, final reading.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Hang on, Adam, I apologize. I zoned out. We're voting on the budget and final
The
reading?
budget, this is the final reading.
No.
budget.
no,
No.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. Item 10, Mrs. Frank.
An ordinance of the city of Williamsport, county of Lycoming, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for year 2024.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. All right, second reading of the tax ordinance. We pass this in first reading as is. It proposes a mill tax increase. We've talked about trying to reduce that to a half a mil. So that would be, it currently reads 17.22 mils. If we wanted to reduce it to a half a mil, we would want to change it to 16.72. Go ahead.
I told you, we just need to put a microphone.
Yeah.
See.
Just be aware that that will affect the revenue
Mhm.
on the budget, so that will bring us down about a half, $400,000 in terms of revenue
Yep.
on the budget.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for the reminder, but we anticipated that. I'll make a motion to amend the ordinance to change the millage from 17.22 to 16.72.
A second.
Motion in a second. Any comments or questions on the proposed amendment? I know we've had some conversation about it last week. I'm not gonna sit here and argue one way or the other. I get the argument either way. Liz, by all means, chime in here.
Yeah.
I get you.
Right.
I get you.
I appreciate you getting me. And I apologize for, as I said, being such a no fun on this issue, but we were already running a budget that was, well, actually, help me out, guys, because you made some changes when I wasn't here. What's the current deficit spending that we're engaging in this year after all those machinations to the budget? We were 825,000 to the negative. We were running a $300,000 deficit at the end of this year, and that's if we included the contribution into the emergency and reserve fund as income. We were running, it looks like a $1.2 million deficit, but we were actually running a $300,000 deficit at the end of this year, which is the first time, as I said in my time on council, that I've ever seen us actually run a deficit budget at year end. And that was then the projected deficit for 2024 was 825,000. Tracy, do you know if we substantially changed that with all of these alterations?
I believe that the changes from last week reduced the deficit by 161,000. So we went from 800 to 700, and with the 400,000 coming in now, would be down to a deficit of $300,000. But I do want to remind you that includes $2+ million of one-time revenues for 2023,
right, including that $400,000 that might be more that.
Correct. Right. So even more so.
So it's actually about $2.7 million in one-time revenue
Correct.
this year.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So we have 2.7 million in one-time revenue. We're running in, currently a $350,000 deficit, but when we adjust the millage by $0.5 that's going to bump it back up to about a $750,000 deficit this year.
Correct.
Right. All of which is to say that all those savings are great, guys, but they're only great if we aren't actually losing money to start with. So if we left the 1 mil in place, now we'd only be running a $300,000 deficit this year, money that we might make up by the time we don't spend everything in some of those line items. So we could potentially have a budget that operates at a perfect balance, absent that 2.7 million in one-time revenue, if we leave the tax increase at 1 mil. I understand why everyone does not want to do that, but I'd just like to point out that we're still losing money. And we're still losing a lot of money. And next year, when we don't have American Rescue Plan Act funds to put into our budget, we're going to need to find $2.7 million to make a budget of this magnitude happen.
Correction, even more because we have contractual increases that will take effect next year.
So, okay, yeah, so 3.5, say $1 million, which translates to a little better than 4 mils, right? And we do not have a mechanism in place by which we predict that we can even make up a quarter of that. All of our hopes and dreams, all of our scheming, all of our potential, like maybe we can take in a little bit extra here, a little bit extra there. None of that adds up to $3.5 million. So with that in mind, I will be opposing the reduction of the tax increase. And yes, that makes me a jerk because nobody wants to see taxes go up. On the other hand, at some point, we're going to have this fight. And at some point, we're going to have to jump taxes by a whole ton of money. And I don't want to have to explain that to people. And I prefer to try to do this gradually, as I have explained. But the thing needed to start a couple of years ago and we didn't start it. So now, this is the hill that I die on, y'all. Okay. So I'll be voting no. Thanks, Adam, for the moment there in the sun.
You're welcome. No worries. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say that your points aren't valid. They absolutely are. So, I think I'll be supporting it. I get where we're going. This is gonna keep happening without any real big substantive structural change with how we operate,
Right.
with our contracts, et cetera. You know, maybe we can make some headway over the next couple of years there. But
We
even-
need to, we don't have an option. We need to.
Correct, we need to,
Right.
but even with that, you know, we're likely looking at this over the next number of years for sure. So,
Right.
absolutely, I'm hoping that this is gradual, and that we can mitigate how much more gradual we get over the next couple of years. That's why I'll support this for sure. But you're not wrong, Liz.
Right. If I can.
Go ahead.
If I can make one other point, we do a lot of talking about the Williamsport's tax rate and how it compares to other municipalities. And the one thing that I would say, and that I have said for years also, is that the only thing I think that is worse than we obviously don't want to have a higher tax rate than other municipalities. There are multiple concrete reasons to do with things that are well out of our hands that mean that we do. But the only thing I can think of that is worse than having a higher tax rate is not having a system in place that makes it understandable and explicable to our citizens, and that they know what to expect, even if that is a tax increase. So all of this dithering and proposals and then changing it down, and to me, a reasonable government, a reasonable business entity, anything tries to plan for cost increases and explain to their constituents what they need to expect, and tries to put that into the budget in a way that is understandable and that doesn't come as a, what are they going to do? I don't know. Let's read the paper tomorrow and see what we're paying on January 1st thing. So I would encourage us to look at the concept of, budgeting out over a course of years and trying to understand what that looks like so that we can fund our own expenditures over the course of those years. Because I guess I think kind of jerking the population around is almost worse than simply having a higher tax rate. But anyway, sorry. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
No worries, understood. So any other comments or questions on the proposed amendment to the millage? Mr. Pelisi.
No, I just, Liz, I completely understand where you're coming from. I truly do. And as I said it last week, when you spend more money than you have, that by definition is you're going broke. And to what we just talked about, we're already looking at going in, already owing money next year that we don't even have. However, I don't like to see the tax increase at all. I know it, in this case, it's a necessary evil. Liz, I know where your approach is.
Right.
However, I don't think it's responsible of us to continuously pass that on to the taxpayers, as I know that there are increases that we absolutely have to make. And Liz, your comparison to a company, when your company's not operating correctly, you got to know that if you raise the cost of your entrees so much just to make up for the failings of your business, people aren't going to go to your restaurant. They're going to go somewhere else. And as such, you need to look internally to look and see where you can trim the fat yourself to make things more efficient, to stretch the dollars. And with that, that's why I'm going to support the budget, because I think that it's irresponsible for us to just continue to operate in the same manner that we've operated in for years past. And we continuously have to raise taxes. We pass that on to our taxpayers rather than us look internally and see what we're doing wrong, see what is not balanced by way of the various different contracts, the various different agreements that we have with organizations and whatever we have in the city. And that's where we need to look, I think, first and foremost. But then also, to your point, we really need to start having more conversation, open dialogue on where the city is currently, where the city is heading, financially. And those conversations have to start, they have to start now. They had to start yesterday. They had to start 4 years ago. Because I don't want to sound like it's like I'm doom and gloom, but I'm just trying to be realistic about this. We are going to be in severe financial trouble. Unless we start to look internally at how we can fix things. That's my personal belief. But I know, I understand where you're coming from.
There has to be a balancing act there, Vince. We have to
Mhm.
understand what our current obligations are and what our current financial needs are, and then work to mitigate them. But the moves that we made this evening and 2 week and last week have not actually trimmed anything from the budget in the realistic sense of cutting costs over the long run. All we've done is allocate costs that were there, to American Rescue Plan Act instead. So we have not trimmed any fat, and we have not cut any expenditures that will affect next year's budget. And that, I think, is the problem that I'm having. If we were getting rid of costs that we're going to annualize, that we're going to change the budget next year, then that makes perfect sense to me. Yes, then we try to reduce the millage rate. Then we try to but we haven't done that. We need to. I'm not saying that we don't, but until we do, I don't. I see it as irresponsible to try to reduce our taxation amount when we can't reduce our actual expenditures. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions on the proposed amendment to the tax ordinance? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank, on the proposed amendment to the tax ordinance.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
No.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 6-1. Any final comments or questions? All right, Mrs. Frank, second reading. Take the vote if you would, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
No.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-1. Thank you all for a good fruitful conversation over the past couple of weeks. Everybody's work, including the administration's, very helpful. And while, this is certainly, we've had some debate on it back and forth here. I'm not going to sit here and say there is a right answer or a wrong answer, but appreciate the consensus we found. Very much so. All right, Norm, quick question. So, I think something we wanted to look at with the budget that completely slipped my mind, I think everybody's mind, was a proposal for a 52nd police officer funded by the Pennsylvania State Police. If we wanted to entertain that, can we reopen since we voted it a second time, or should we look at moving through transfer ordinances in January when a MOU comes forward?
We could do it as a transfer ordinance,
Okay.
Because then you're gonna know the actual costs that are
Okay.
gonna be involved.
Chief, apologies, that wasn't deliberate. It slipped my mind. I know a couple of us have talked about it and having some questions, it slipped our mind. Okay. When there's an MOU put together, I'd say bring it forward. And then I think we can have that conversation. And we'll to Norm's point, we'll know more detail on costs, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
work? Again, apologies, wasn't deliberate there, so
No worries.
awesome. Okay. Item 14, except for filing. This one a lot faster than I expected. Finance Committee meeting minutes from July 5th and July 18th, 2023. Water Sanitary Authority minutes, November 15th, 2023. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Any comments, questions on the minutes for filing? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 15, announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting is going to be Thursday, January 4th, 7 PM. Right here, Trade and Transit 2. We will do a reorganizational meeting and swearing in on Tuesday, January 2nd, per third class optional charter. We have a finance committee meeting advertised if we need it. That would be if we do it on Tuesday, January 2nd at 1 PM. I'll open the floor for comments from members of city council. I will just say to my 6 colleagues, to our colleagues in the administration, of a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Same to our constituents. It's been an interesting year. I've enjoyed working with all 6 of you. I've really enjoyed deepening my relationship with each of you as friends. I mean that we all talk about this a little bit. And I remember a comment Eric and I made last week with the commissioners, right? We disagree on a number of things, right? But we really work through it. And I actually appreciate that a lot. I learn a lot from that. I grow a lot from it. I hope you all do too. So thank you all for that. Same with the administration. We've certainly had our disagreements. And we're going to continue to do that. But I grow from it. I hope that all of you do. I think it generally is productive. I hope that it is. And I hope that we can continue that in 2024 as well. But nonetheless, wish all your families a prosperous new year, a wonderful Christmas, everybody. Any other comments from members of council?
I think you hit it all.
I think we could say ditto.
Ditto.
That as well. And we do have 2 that are in the administration that are leaving that we're going to miss very much. Those 2 sitting right there. It's been a godsend. Liz and I are finishing our 14th year on council, and I can't give you enough accolades. You raised the bar pretty high, both of you, and you know, we need to hit that as close as we can, you know, aim high, miss high. And I think we need to keep that in our forefront. But we wish you all the best. And I want to do that personally, but also for the record, just for the great job you've done. These have been difficult times, and you took a lot of things head on, and it was great to have support from great people that are moving on to well-deserved places. Wish you all the best. God bless.
All said. Absolutely well said. Any other comments from members of council? Any comments from the administration as we close out 2023? Oh yeah, sorry, we're done. I know. Mayor, welcome.
Yeah.
It completely slipped my mind that you were late. My apologies. If I would have thought about it, I would have texted you to. My bad. But welcome.
Yes.
Any comments you may have,
Yeah,
please.
Apologies for being late, family. Anyway, I just want to thank City Council and good evening, President Yoder, Vice President Cass, members of Council Administration. Just thank you for the work. I was listening in. I know some of you said that for the last week. I appreciate all of that from all of you and from the administration. I heard the last little bit there from Councilman Allison. I'll echo those sentiments as well. Clearly, Molly has made an impact over her time here. And I think it's undeniable what Tracy Rash has meant to us the last year and a half, and really indescribable. We'll miss both of them. You know, and just, you know, I don't know where we'd be if Tracy wouldn't have come along. We talked about the connections we make. We talked about that a little bit last week. But Tracy was arguably probably the best connection I've made during my time at Pennsylvania Municipal League at a conference in Pittsburgh, I think is where that connection came. And I jumped on a Zoom with her then and got her here. So anyways, I would like to echo those sentiments. And I thank you so much for everything that you've done for us and for the city of Williamsport and the taxpayers and residents. And just again, thank you all. Thanks to council for the work that we've done on the budget. I appreciate that. And I look forward to 2024 and wish you all a great holiday season and a prosperous new year. So thank you.
Ditto. Any other comments from the administration? Any comments from the public? There is nobody from the public. Any comments from the news media? There is nobody from the news media. I'll take a motion in a second for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Motion in a second. All in favor? Aye. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Meeting adjourned.